It was a quiet evening at Buckingham Palace, with the sun beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the royal grounds. Inside the palace, the usual air of serenity and control hung over everything, as it always did when the royal family was present. The guards stood at their posts, their uniforms crisp and their attention sharp. They had been trained for years to protect the palace and its residents, to keep watch over the secrets and rituals that filled the ancient halls. Among them was one guard who had been a part of the royal service for over a decade, a man who had seen and heard much but always kept his silence. He was known for his professionalism and dedication to duty, but on this evening something unexpected was about to happen. It would be a moment that would change everything for him, and for Queen Camilla in ways neither of them could have imagined. The guard had been assigned to a late shift that day, something not unusual for him. His job was to remain on high alert, to make sure everything inside the palace went as planned. However, that evening was different. He had been asked to take up a post closer to the Queen's private quarters, a position he usually didn't hold. This assignment felt strange from the start, but he knew better than to question orders. The Queen was known for being a private person, preferring peace and quiet to the bustle of royal life. Her days were often filled with meetings and duties, but at night she valued her solitude. As the hours passed, the guard stood motionless, his mind focused on the quiet sounds of the palace, footsteps echoing down long corridors, the faint rustle of curtains in the wind, the soft hum of palace servants moving about their work. It was easy to get lost in the rhythm of palace life where everything was orderly, predictable. But on that evening, the predictability would be shattered. Around midnight, the Queen herself appeared in the hallway. The guard hadn't expected her at all. She wasn't dressed in the formal attire most people saw her in when she was in public, but in a simple, elegant robe. Her face showed no sign of the usual royal composure, though. There was something more personal about her tonight, something that made the guard feel a little out of place. But he stood tall as he always did, ready to serve. Queen Camilla's presence was calming yet commanding, as it always was. She had a reputation for being gentle but firm, someone who carried the weight of the royal family with grace. But tonight she seemed different. There was an unusual tension in the air, a quiet intensity that caught the guard's attention. "Good evening, Your Majesty," the guard said respectfully, his voice steady but with a hint of surprise. The Queen offered him a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good evening," she replied softly, her voice carrying an unusual softness. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them seemed thick with unspoken words. The guard, unsure of what to say, stood still, watching as the Queen gazed down the hallway. It was a quiet moment, but there was something in the silence that felt heavy, as though something was about to break through. Then, unexpectedly, the Queen spoke again. "You've been with us for many years, haven't you?" The guard was taken aback. It was rare for a member of the royal family to engage in casual conversation with the staff, especially the guards. He nodded politely, though his mind raced, trying to figure out why she was asking. "Yes, Your Majesty. 10 years now," she nodded, her eyes still distant. "A long time. You've seen much, I'm sure." Her words hung in the air, and the guard felt a sudden shift in the conversation. He wasn't sure what she meant by it, but something in her tone made him feel uneasy, like she was leading the conversation in a direction he hadn't expected. It was as if she wanted him to know something that was weighing on her mind. "Many things, Your Majesty," he replied, his voice even. "I've seen the ups and downs of royal life." The Queen's gaze finally met his, and there was an intensity in her eyes that made him feel even more uncomfortable. For a brief moment she seemed vulnerable, like the weight of her position had become too much for her to bear. Then, almost as if she had made a decision in her mind, she spoke again, her voice much quieter now, barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something important, but I need you to promise me that you'll never speak of it. Not to anyone. Not to anyone in the palace or the press. It must remain between us." The guard, confused and intrigued, didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to hearing the Queen speak so openly, so directly. But he knew his duty. His loyalty to the crown was unwavering, and whatever the Queen had to say, he would keep it to himself. "I swear, Your Majesty," he said, his voice firm, "I will never speak of it." The Queen took a deep breath. almost as if preparing herself for what she was about to say. She glanced around quickly, making sure they were still alone. Then, in a low voice, she began to speak. There has been talk. Rumors. About a test. Something that involves my DNA. People have been asking questions. Questions that I can't answer. It's a part of my past that I didn't want anyone to know. The guard felt a chill run down his spine. The mention of DNA testing, especially regarding the Queen, was something he had never heard of before. It sounded like something out of a scandalous story, the kind of thing that could ruin reputations and destroy lives. He didn't know what to say. This was no small matter. Whatever the Queen had just shared with him was clearly not something meant for the public. His mind raced, and in his shock he found himself blurting out the first words that came to him. I don't understand. What kind of test are you talking about, Your Majesty? At that moment the Queen's eyes widened and her face drained of color. The words had slipped out so easily from the guard, and now it was clear that something had gone terribly wrong. In the silence that followed, the Queen's expression quickly changed from that of vulnerability to one of alarm. She didn't say a word, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. The guard realized in that instant that he had made a grave mistake. He had unwittingly brought up a secret that could cause irreparable harm to the monarchy. The truth of the matter, the details behind the test, were something that could shatter not just the Queen's image, but the royal family's credibility as a whole. And now he had spoken of it aloud. The Queen's face hardened in an instant, her posture straightening as she composed herself. Forget I said anything, she ordered quietly but firmly. It's nothing, but the guard knew better. He had already heard too much. And now both of them were caught in a situation from which there was no easy escape. The moment the words left the guard's lips, a cold silence fell between him and Queen Camilla. It wasn't just a quiet pause, but a heavy, thick silence, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. He could feel his heart beat in his chest, each thud echoing in his ears as he stared at the Queen. Her face, usually so composed and controlled, was suddenly a mask of surprise, disbelief, and something else, fear. It was a fleeting expression, but the guard saw it clearly. The words he had spoken were not just innocent curiosity. They were a breach of the trust he had been given, a betrayal of the secrecy that surrounded the royal family. He had been trained for years to protect the monarchy, to remain loyal, and to keep every secret hidden within the walls of Buckingham Palace. But now in this single moment he had broken that trust, and the consequences could be far more severe than he ever imagined. The Queen's eyes widened, her lips parting as if to say something, but no words came out. She opened and closed her mouth in quick succession, her breath quickening, and for a second the guard could have sworn that she was struggling to regain her composure. The calm, poised Queen he had known for years seemed to be unraveling right before his eyes. He wanted to take the words back, to swallow them back into his mouth. But it was too late. What was said could not be unsaid. He watched, frozen, as her gaze shifted from his face to the empty hallway, her expression a mix of panic and calculation. Her usual royal poise was slipping away, replaced by something far more human. The guard had never seen her like this before. In all his years of service, he had never witnessed the Queen so vulnerable, so unprotected. Your Majesty, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I didn't mean to, but the Queen raised a hand, silencing him instantly. The guard stopped mid-sentence, suddenly aware of the gravity of the situation. Camilla's gaze was now fixed on the floor, and her shoulders hunched slightly, as if she was gathering her strength to speak. You didn't mean to, she said softly, her voice steady but laced with an emotion he couldn't quite place. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was more like a deep, deep fear that was bubbling just beneath the surface. But you did. The guard swallowed, feeling a sense of dread settle in his stomach. The Queen's voice, though calm, held a weight that made every word feel like 1,000 pounds. He knew better than to press further. This was no ordinary conversation, and whatever had just been revealed was no ordinary secret. A few seconds passed in silence, and the tension between them seemed to grow with each passing moment. The Queen stood in front of him, but the distance between them felt like miles. The guard could sense that she was trying to gather herself, trying to figure out how to handle the situation without causing any more damage. She was calculating, always calculating, and this was a moment she knew could change everything. I've made a mistake, she finally said, her voice quieter now, but the guard could hear the weight of her words. You must forget what you've heard. The guard's mind raced. He wanted to ask what exactly she meant by the test, the DNA, the rumors she had mentioned, but he knew that asking too many questions could make things worse. He had already spoken too freely. The last thing he needed was to dig himself further into a hole that he might never climb out of. Instead, he simply nodded, his mouth dry. "I understand, Your Majesty. I'll say nothing. I swear it," but the Queen wasn't looking at him now. She was staring ahead, her eyes unfocused, lost in thought. For a moment, the guard could see the weight of the royal world upon her shoulders. The palace, the crown, the centuries of history, it all seemed to rest on her in that instant. He knew that if this secret ever got out, it would not only ruin her reputation but could potentially shake the very foundation of the monarchy. She had been speaking in whispers, and the guard had caught only fragments of her words, but he had heard enough. Whatever the Queen was hiding, it was something serious, something that could bring down not just her but the entire royal family if it came to light. The Queen took a deep breath, as if bracing herself for something. Then she turned her gaze back to him, and for a brief moment their eyes locked. It was an intense look, one that conveyed more than words ever could. She was pleading with him, not just for her own sake but for the sake of the monarchy. She was asking him to keep her secret, to protect her from the consequences of the truth. The guard's heart pounded harder now. He had always believed in the importance of loyalty, but this was a test like no other. This was no longer just about following orders. This was about making a decision that could change the course of his life, and possibly the life of the Queen. He had always admired her, even from a distance. Camilla was not just a figurehead to him. She was a person with her own struggles and challenges, her own fears. Seeing her like this, vulnerable and afraid, made the guard realize that even the royals were human. They weren't immune to the pressures of their world, the scrutiny and the judgment that came with their title. They were just like everyone else, except that their mistakes and secrets had far greater consequences. "I won't say a word, Your Majesty," the guard said again, his voice more certain this time. "Your secret is safe with me." Queen Camilla nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something he couldn't quite name. She gave him a tight, almost imperceptible smile. It was a gesture of thanks, but it was also one of relief. She had placed her trust in him, and for a moment the guard felt the weight of that trust heavy on his shoulders. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost breaking. "You don't know how much this means." The guard was about to respond when a sound from down the hallway interrupted them. Footsteps. Someone was coming. The Queen's expression immediately changed, her face once again becoming a mask of royal composure. She straightened up, her back stiffening, and she took a step back from the guard. Without another word, she turned and began to walk quickly down the hall, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The guard watched her go, his mind still racing with questions that he knew would never be answered. He felt an overwhelming sense of confusion, guilt, and fear. What had just happened? What had he learned? And what would be the price of knowing this secret? He stood there for a long time, long after she had disappeared from view. The silence in the hallway seemed to stretch on forever. The guard's mind was buzzing with the weight of the moment. He had made a promise, but even as he made it, he wasn't sure what it would cost him. The Queen had begged him to keep her secret, and he would do so, but at what price? And what if the truth came out? Would he be able to keep the promise, or would he be forced to face the consequences of his words? As the guard finally turned and made his way back to his post, his thoughts continued to race. The palace, with all its grandeur and history, suddenly felt like a prison, a place where secrets were buried deep, and where the truth could shatter everything. And in that moment, the guard realized something that would stay with him forever. In the world of royalty, loyalty wasn't just a matter of duty, it was a matter of survival. The guard's mind raced as he stood alone in the hallway, the weight of the Queen's secret pressing down on him. It had only been moments since she had walked away, but the intensity of the situation was still fresh in his mind. He could hardly believe what had just happened. The Queen, known for her control and grace, had shown a side of herself he had never imagined, vulnerable, desperate, even fearful. It was a side that made him question everything he had thought he knew about the royal family. The air in the palace felt heavier now, thicker with uncertainty. The guard's thoughts were a whirlwind, spinning with the knowledge of the secret he now carried. He had been part of the royal service for years, and in all that time he had never been so shaken. The palace, once a place of routine and structure, suddenly felt like a labyrinth of hidden truths and unspoken rules. He couldn't help but wonder what else was concealed behind those golden gates. Despite his promise to remain silent, the guard couldn't stop thinking about what the Queen had said. The mention of DNA testing, something so personal, so private, made his mind reel. Why would such a test be necessary? What could it reveal about the Queen's past that was so important to hide? He had always known that the royal family had secrets, but this was different. This wasn't just a scandal or a minor misstep. It was something that could bring everything crashing down. The Queen had asked him to forget what he had heard, but how could he? Her words echoed in his mind. You must forget what you've heard. But he hadn't forgotten. How could he? This wasn't something you could easily erase from your memory. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this wasn't just about protecting the Queen. It was about protecting the entire monarchy. If this secret ever got out, it could change everything. The royal family's reputation, their carefully cultivated image, it could all be torn apart in an instant. As the guard tried to calm his racing thoughts, he heard footsteps approaching from behind. His heart skipped a beat. He turned, instinctively straightening up, expecting to see the Queen returning to speak with him. But it wasn't the Queen who appeared in the hallway. Instead, it was one of the palace staff, a young woman with a clipboard in hand moving quickly down the corridor. She glanced at him as she passed, but there was no sign of recognition or concern. She was simply doing her job, unaware of the storm that had just passed through the palace. The guard watched her go, but his mind was still on the Queen. He wondered how she was holding up after their brief conversation. Had she calmed down, or was she still filled with the same anxiety and fear that had shown in her eyes? He knew she was under constant pressure, but this seemed different. The way she had spoken to him, pleading with him, almost begging him to keep her secret, had struck a chord deep within him. It was as though in that moment she had let her guard down completely, trusting him with something that could destroy her. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. This wasn't about him. It wasn't about his feelings. His duty was clear: protect the Queen, keep her secret. He had made that promise and he would honor it. But the more he thought about the situation, the more he realized that the Queen's desperation wasn't just about keeping a personal secret. It was about the survival of everything she had worked for. The royal family's stability, their image, their very existence as the symbolic leaders of the country, it all rested on the delicate balance of secrets and public perception. The guard didn't know what to do with the information he had. He had never been in a position like this before. The royal family had always been a symbol of strength and unity, but now he could see the cracks in the facade. What would happen if those cracks grew larger? What would happen if more secrets came to light? Would the monarchy crumble under the weight of its own hidden truths? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door to his post. The guard immediately stood at attention, ready for whatever task lay ahead. The last thing he wanted was to seem distracted or unprofessional, especially now. He had a duty to perform and he had to remain focused. "Enter," he called out, his voice steady and calm. The door opened slowly, and to his surprise, it was the Queen herself standing in the doorway. She looked different now, her posture more rigid, her face again hidden behind a mask of royal composure. Gone was the vulnerability he had seen earlier. In its place was the Queen the world knew, the confident, poised figure who had been a constant presence in the public eye for years. She stepped into the room, her eyes briefly meeting his before she lowered her gaze. There was a moment of silence between them, and for the first time, the guard felt unsure of what to say. He had promised to keep her secret, but now, seeing her standing before him again, the weight of the promise seemed even greater. How could he help her? What could he do to protect her from the storm that was clearly brewing? The Queen spoke first, her voice low but firm. "I'm sorry for what happened earlier," she said, her words carefully chosen. "I didn't mean to drag you into this, but I had no choice. You were the only one who could help." The guard swallowed hard, his mind still racing with the implications of her words. "Your Majesty, She raised a hand, silencing him before he could finish. "I know what you must be thinking," she said, her voice softening. "This is not how I wanted things to go. But now that you know, there's no turning back." The guard felt a chill run through him. No turning back? Was she implying that he had become a part of something much larger than himself? He had thought this was just about keeping a secret, but now, it seemed like he was entangled in something far more dangerous. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. The Queen needed his help, and he couldn't turn his back on her. "I don't know what to do," the guard admitted, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I've never been in this situation before." The Queen gave him a small, understanding nod. "I know, neither have I," she said, her voice tinged with a quiet sadness. "But I need you to understand something. This secret, it's not just mine. It affects everything. If it comes out, if the public learns the truth, it will destroy everything we've worked for. The monarchy will never recover." The guard's heart pounded in his chest as he listened to her words. He had always known that the royal family was surrounded by whispers and rumors, but he hadn't realized just how much was at stake. The Queen was right. If the truth came out, it wouldn't just affect her. It would affect the entire monarchy, the entire country. The very fabric of their public image was tied to their secrets, and now he was a part of that. "I understand, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "I won't speak of this. I swear it." The Queen looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face as though trying to read his thoughts. Finally, she nodded, a small but grateful smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me." The guard remained silent, unsure of how to respond. The Queen had trusted him with something that could change everything, and he could feel the weight of that trust pressing down on him. He had made his promise, but the road ahead was uncertain. What would happen if the secret was discovered? What if someone else learned the truth? The consequences were unimaginable. As the Queen turned to leave, she paused at the door, her back to him. "Remember," she said softly, "no matter what happens, you must protect the crown. You must protect everything we've built." The guard nodded, his mind still swirling with questions. The Queen disappeared into the hallway, and once again, the silence of the palace settled around him. But this time it felt different. The calm that had once defined the royal household now seemed fragile, as if it could be shattered by the smallest of tremors. And in that moment, the guard realized that the Queen's desperation was not just about protecting herself, it was about protecting the monarchy itself. He had been drawn into something far bigger than himself, and no matter where this journey led, there was no turning back.